Namaste. Welcome to Bharat Vichar. Today we are again joined by Dr. Robert Spencer. He's an Islamic scholar and author of such books as The History of Jihad, The Complete Infidel Guide Quran, Complete Infidel Guide ISIS, and The Complete Infidel Guide Iran. Dr. Spencer, thank you so much for coming on Bharat Vichar.
Thank you. Very good to speak with you.
So for the first question that I want to ask you, it's to do with the law. It's not to do with the religion, because you are a theologian. You have studied Islam, you have studied Christianity, you have studied Buddhism, you have studied the Jewish Torah. So, but this is a law-related, constitution-related question. A while back, there was this news that came in that Congresswoman Omar uh, wanted a Muslim Heritage Month. Now, there are many heritage months in America. Scottish, on top of my mind, there is Scottish and Italian celebrates and so on and so forth. But then I started to think, don't you think it is the fundamental violation of the First Amendment, wherein government will not either suppress religion nor support any religion?
Yes, you're quite right. To have a Muslim Heritage Month is very different from having an Italian Heritage Month or a French Heritage Month, because instead of celebrating a particular nation and people, it would be celebrating a particular religion, which would be a clear violation of the First Amendment. Ilhan Omar is not only indifferent to that, but actually is aiding and abetting an ongoing effort to consider Muslims to be an ethnicity of themselves in the United States. This is in line, of course, with the classic Islamic theological view that Muslims are not citizens of any country, but are a global community, the Ummah, that supersedes all nationality. And so consequently, in the United States, we have a group called the Council on American Islamic Relations, as if American and Islamic are two separate things that cannot coexist together, but have to have some kind of a relationship with one another. That is, they can't blend together. It's not like being somebody in France who moves to America and has children in America who are Americans and so on. The implication is that you're either American or Islamic. It's akin to an ethnicity. So this is part of the endeavor to brand all opposition to jihad terrorism and Sharia oppression of women and others as racism. If Islam is an ethnicity, if Muslims are a particular ethnic group, then to oppose jihad terrorism is racist. And so then it can be silenced as a result. Of course, the national trauma of the United States that's deeply dividing the nation to this day is racism, and consequently that's a very potent weapon for Ilhan Omar and her ilk to try to use. But of course, it's completely false, because Muslims are not all of one ethnicity or all of one race. They are of all races, and there are Islamic jihadis of all races.
Dr. Spencer, I consider myself to be a liberal. I believe in the rule of the law, the letter of the law. I'm a constitutionalist by practice. So I was just thinking that for a very long time, the Republicans, the Conservative Party, was trying to introduce school prayers into American public school, which was, I think, the courts have struck down many a times. Even the state won't implement it, because it is against the First Amendment. Because you can, in a public school, you will have Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jews, any religion, Buddhists and Christians. So, and the people who opposed it is the most were the Democratic Party. But how come for this particular Muslim Heritage Month, she's getting any kind of traction? Don't they understand the law? Don't they understand the fundamentals of First Amendment? I'm an Indian.
No, they might understand the fundamentals, but they don't care about them. They are not interested in the First Amendment or the Constitution in general. And this is also taking place, the call for a Muslim Heritage Month, amidst an ongoing effort to bring Muslim prayers into public schools. And there have been cases all over the United States of this, where the same places public schools in the United States where Christian prayer was forbidden. And there were, as you noted, numerous court cases establishing that the prayer from a particular religious group would violate the constitutional directive that there would be no established religion. Now there are Muslim prayers in many public schools under the guise of the freedom of religion and the supposed necessity of Muslims to pray at particular times every day. Now, this is absolutely false. Islamic law teaches that if you're not able, for whatever reason, to pray the prayers at a specified time, then you can make them up later. So there's no necessity for Muslim children to go out of class at any time for prayers. But this has been instituted. There have been not only Muslims excused from classes, but prayer rooms established in many public schools. And this has been defended by the very same people who would say that Christian prayer and other prayers from other sects has no place in public schools. But for Muslims, there's an exception because on the left, the favored religion is Islam.
So why are the liberals, the people of America, the liberals are supposed to be the educated lot in America? Because if I watch CNN, the Republicans are, I think dumb hicks, if I may use that term. It's very offensive. A lot of nice people, who are Republicans, who didn't like Trump actually, but the educated lot is supposed to be the liberals, the educated one, the one with
supposedly.
degrees. Supposedly, but don't they understand that? Again, stress the fact that it is a clear violation of the First Amendment, without which America will not exist. And the argument is that the Republicans are obsessed with the Second Amendment, the gun, and the Democrats are obsessed with the First Amendment. But the fact of the matter is that if the First Amendment gets diluted even a little bit, America is gone.
Yes.
Is that threat looms large over America?
Oh, that's a very big threat right now. And if the Democrats are obsessed with the First Amendment, as you say, it's only because they want to do away with it. There are ongoing efforts that are escalating to destroy the freedom of speech, to criminalize dissent. These things have never happened in the United States before, but we're looking at people openly calling for it now, and that's never happened before, and all those people are on the left. I noted before that the left's favored religion is Islam, and some people find this very strange, but it proceeds from the fact that Muslims have presented themselves as a particular ethnicity in the United States and claim that opposition to them and opposition to jihad violence is racism. Consequently, if they want to be anti-racist, then they are pro-Islam. And the Islamic groups in the United States connected with the Muslim Brotherhood have very skillfully portrayed themselves as victims of racism and this new word Islamophobia, which is supposedly a species of this racism. And so consequently, the left has completely fallen for this and is all for special accommodation for Muslims, the criminalization of criticism of Islam, of the cartoons of Muhammad that have led to so much rage around the world and so on. There's so many people on the left who are all for restrictions on the freedom of speech in order to please Muslims because they have bought the idea that Muslims are somehow uniquely the victims of racism and this made-up word Islamophobia.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Now, this happened a while back. We are now almost on the eve of 20th anniversary of 9/11. When the idea to rebuild the buildings again was mooted, designs were submitted, there was this demand that let there be a mosque near the ground zero. Now, I'm going to be someone who is going to be asking this question without passion or prejudice. A mosque, if someone gets the permission to build, please go ahead. But why it was opposed and how they managed to stop it? Because if I'm not mistaken, a lot of support was generated for the mosque to be built in the ground zero area. How it all started and how it was stopped, if you can.
It all was going to go ahead. They were going to build a 16-story mega mosque on the site of a building that was at ground zero, right next to the World Trade Center, a building that had been a clothing store that had been extensively damaged in the attacks. the jet engine from one of the airplanes, when it crashed into the World Trade Center, flew out of the airplane and crashed into the roof of this building. So it was part of the damage that was done on Ground Zero. And so this building was going to be torn down, and a 16-story mega mosque built there that was supposedly, it was marketed as a mosque of reconciliation and peace. Now, you know, because you're in India, that there's no such thing as a mosque of reconciliation and peace. That there are mosques all over India that are built on the site of Hindu temples that were destroyed by jihadis, and that the mosques were constructed on those sites in order to emphasize the victory of Islam over Hinduism. And the same thing was done all over the Middle East and North Africa. Churches and synagogues destroyed and mosques built on the site in order to emphasize the victory of Islam over Judaism and Christianity. So there is no doubt whatsoever that if that mosque had been built, that it would have been understood, even if the claims that the organizers made had been sincere, that it was a mosque of peace and so on. Even if they had been telling the truth about that, it would have been understood worldwide as another victory mosque, like so many mosques all over the world that are built on the site of the cherished places, the holy places of conquered people. Most notably the Temple Mount, the site of the Jewish temple, where there's not one but two mosques to show the victory of Islam over Judaism. Or the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, Istanbul, which was the greatest church in the Christian world for 1,000 years and was turned into a mosque to show the victory of Islam. So they were going to build this mosque. They had the approval of the enthusiastic approval of the mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, and the New York City officials. The only thing they didn't have was the approval of the people. And at that time, Pamela Geller, the president of the American Freedom Defense Initiative, noticed an article about this in the New York Times, and we discussed it. I joined in her efforts on this. We held rallies at Ground Zero, and I'm proud to say that we beat that mosque. 70% of Americans were against it being built, and it never was built. The developer, Muslim Sharif Al-Gamal, he still owns that property. He did ultimately tear down the building that was damaged, and he built condos in the place with a plan for having an Islamic museum or something there on one floor, but it wasn't anything like the 16-story structure that he was going to build at first that was going to be entirely a mosque. So a victory mosque at the World Trade Center Ground Zero site was prevented, and this was a terrible thing for many people. The left, once again, thought that it was a terrible display of racism and bigotry, but we understood. We were the only ones, and it was never addressed. We were the only ones talking about the historical precedents, the fact of so many mosques being built on Hindu sites in India and so on. We were the only ones talking about that. And the other side never explained, never refuted what we were saying about it being a triumphal mosque. It would have been like after state Shinto fueled Japanese militarism and led to the attack on Pearl Harbor, if you'd put a grand Shinto shrine at Pearl Harbor. You can have a Shinto shrine anywhere you want. I have no problem with that, but to put it at Pearl Harbor would have been a calculated insult. And so would this mosque have been.
Also, the date 9/11 is steeped in history, and I don't want to get into that because that discussion itself would take around, at least you'd have to give at least a good 20 to 30 minutes to talk about that particular incident. So we will not get into that. Perhaps those who are watching or those who will watch this video, they can Google it. But the 9/11 date has a very profound historical value for Al Qaeda. Now, sir, America left Afghanistan, and incidentally, the date that they chose for final complete withdrawal was 9/11. I thought somebody in the White House have, I don't know, dropped the ball, if I may use that term. But the question is that, is the new Taliban as vicious as ISIS, or was it always as vicious as ISIS, or
Yes.
or this time around they are a little bit more savvy, because they just told China that we will not be interfering in the Xinjiang region, where the Chinese are holding over a million Uyghur Muslims as hostages in so-called schools of re-education camps now. Uh, Not much different than concentration camps. So, your thoughts on the new Taliban, which everyone is saying all over the world that they have changed. Have they,
No,
or
they
have they
haven't
gotten more
changed at
vicious?
all. They're the same as they always were. The Taliban bases its activities on Islamic law. Even its notification to China that it would not be interfering with the persecution of the Uyghurs is based on Islamic law, because Islamic law mandates that you don't wage jihad against an enemy that has more than twice your strength and that you have no chance of defeating. They thought they could defeat the Soviet Union, and they were right. They thought they could defeat the United States, and they were right. But they're calculating that they can't defeat China, at least at this time, and so they're being conciliatory. That's entirely consistent with their principles. Everything that they do, just like everything the Islamic State did and still does wherever it has domains, is based on Islamic law. And so we saw the Taliban destroy the massive statues of the Buddhas at Bamiyan, and it was the same thing ISIS did when they took control in Iraq and Syria, and they destroyed Etruscan statues and other statues that they found in their domains. And it's the same thing. It's all based on the idea that the societies of the unbelievers are jahiliyyah, are worthless trash that is only worthy to be destroyed. This is something we've seen in India as well.
Uh, well, actually, the ISIS did destroy a lot of artifacts, but at the same time, they also sold quite a few artifacts in the black market to raise money. So, in the
Sure.
end, it is nothing but common thievery. That's what I will say. I mean, ideology can take a backseat, but money comes first.
Well, they believe also in possession granting ownership. And so if they owned those things because they had seized the land in which those things were found and they could sell them, they can make that decision for the good of Islam. It's analogous to the Islamic principles about kidnapping and hostages, that you can take a hostage and you can kill the hostage, you can enslave the hostage, or you can ransom the hostage, or even free the hostage outright. And you make the decision based on what is best for Islam. And so it's the same thing with these artifacts, that it's the guiding rule is what's best for Islam. If you want to destroy them, that's fine. But if you can sell them to get money to further the jihad, that's altogether great as well.
I did not think on those lines, actually, Dr. Spencer. I was thinking more on the line of thievery and smuggling, because the Taliban also indulges in selling opium. I was
Yeah.
listening to this one general, retired Indian Army general. He was asked this question that how is Pakistan supporting Taliban financially? And the general's reply was that absolutely not. They have their own opium setup. Just as in Colombia, Pablo Escobar had his own supply chain and all. So they are making quite a lot of money with opium, and but then opium is a controlled substance, and Muslims should not be using it. So how will they give this legal twist to it?
Well, that's exactly the distinction, that Muslims are forbidden to use such drugs. And the Taliban knows this and doesn't sell it to Muslims. They only sell it to non-Muslims. They have stated this explicitly in the past, that they have no trouble flooding the West with opium from which the heroin is made and so on. That's fine, because it's non-believers who use this sort of thing. And the Quran says, Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. Those who follow him are ruthless to the unbelievers, but merciful to one another. So you can sell drugs, make the money, and that's fine, because you are being ruthless to the unbelievers and merciful to the believers in doing that.
So in their mind, it is divine providence, if I may use that
Yes.
term. Is that correct?
Allah granted them this opium so that they could finance their jihad.
Uh, Now, sir, moving from Afghanistan, it's a slightly not a strategic question, but you somehow managed to bring in theology into it, which is quite amazing, but not surprising. Uh, what price do you think Pakistan is going to pay? Because in Pakistan, there is still a so-called, a middle class, liberal society, don't wear hijab and all that. Their news anchors don't wear hijab and all that. So even though not very bright, but quasi liberal, if I may use that term, what is going to happen to Pakistan? How Pakistan is going to be affected?
Well, the problem is that you've got the Pakistani government financing jihad, and the implication of the ISI, the Pakistani spy service, in the Mumbai attacks in India, in many other jihad activities, in Benazir Bhutto financing the Taliban years ago, and so on. Now, this places the liberal group in Pakistan in a very difficult position, because you've got their own government working against them, working against the principles on which they are basing their lifestyles. So this is only going to lead to strife within Pakistan as the religious groups continue to grow more emboldened and more aggressive, and to carry out their understanding of the necessity to enforce Islamic law, to establish Islamic law by force when necessary. That's going to lead to more violence and more strife within Pakistan itself, as the hardliners begin to blame, or continue, I should say, to blame the liberals for the ills of the society, and take out what they consider to be the punishment of Allah upon them, because the Quran says, fight them and Allah will punish them by your hands. So you talk about women who don't wear hijab, they're under a threat in Pakistan from other Pakistanis who believe that they have a responsibility before Allah to punish those people.
All right. I think some difficult days are ahead for Pakistan. If not
Yes.
already, they are in quite a bit of trouble economically. Now, sir, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the heir apparent, Mohammed bin Salman, recently said that there's going to be a revision of the hadith. They're going to revisit hadith. So what are the global implications of that? Because Saudi Arabia is considered to be the leader of Muslims around the world, though Turkey is trying to take that position away, because most of I think the maximum number of years the caliphate was in the hands of the Turks. Constantinople or Istanbul was the epicenter of the Islamic power, the Ottoman Empire. So do you see this happening in Saudi Arabia? Bin Salman trying to do away with certain hadiths which he says is not compatible with teachings of and the life of Prophet Muhammad?
Well, Mohammed bin Salman is playing a very dangerous game. In a certain sense, he has to play it because he's trying to secure the stability and prosperity of Saudi Arabia for the future. And he sees the world moving away from the oil-based economy. So he sees Saudi Arabia facing a return to the poverty that always characterized it up until oil was struck. He's wanting to prevent that. In order to prevent that, he has to make Saudi Arabia attractive to foreign investment. In order to make Saudi Arabia attractive to foreign investment, he has to relax the strict Islamic rules that make Saudi Arabia so singularly inhospitable and unattractive to non-Muslims. How can he do this? He said in that interview that he's going to reevaluate the influence of inauthentic hadith. Now, there are many inauthentic hadith. There's a whole science of hadith in Islamic law. And Islamic law teaches that there are some hadith that are authentic, reports of Muhammad's words and deeds, that are authentic and normative for Islamic law. And some of them are less reliable in various categories, and some of them are outright forgeries. What Mohammed bin Salman did not say was that he's going to reinterpret any hadith or throw out any authentic hadith. And the problem he faces is that the elements of Saudi society that are so unappealing to non-Muslims are all based on hadith that are considered authentic, not inauthentic ones. For him to say he's going to war against inauthentic hadith is like saying, I'm going to make sure that Saudi Arabia has an oil-based economy. It's already happening. He doesn't have to do anything to achieve that. It's already, Saudi Arabia is already based on authentic hadith. But what he's going to try to do is de-emphasize some of the features of Saudi society that are based on authentic hadith by perhaps trying to claim that the hadith in question are not as strong as most people assume, or simply by de-emphasizing them without calling attention to the reasons why. It's a very difficult game because Saudi Arabia is also full of Islamic clerics who know very well that the hadith on which the nation's laws are based are authentic, and they're going to resist him at every step of the way. So it's a very delicate balancing act, and I wish him all success, but it's not going to be easy.
But my concern is the West, because I think in 1952 or 53, or was it 56, I'm forgetting the exact year, the Iranian revolution where Mosque was overthrown and the Shah Pahlavi was reinstated. Mosque
53.
was a socialist. Mosque
Yes.
was a democratic socialist. As many Democrats in the United States claim to be. They are openly claiming to be socialist. I mean, practically unheard of. 6 years ago, if any politician says, even a Democrat, that I'm a socialist, even Democrats won't vote for that person. So they got rid of him. The Shah Pahlavi came and he ruled for about 20 odd years. And then right now it is ruled by Ayatollah Khomeini. And right now, the chosen leader of Iran is again the person who was chosen by the Ayatollah. So, but the thing is that bin Salman is facing more pressure from the West, from America, who is Saudi Arabia's #1 ally. Now, they are obsessed with Jamal Khashoggi, but a lot of people don't know the fact that Jamal Khashoggi was actually plotting against bin Salman. And in Saudi Arabia, if you do something like that, you are going to get chopped up. That's the way it is. It has been for hundreds of years. So, is there a possibility that America might try to play spoil sport?
Yes. Because the Biden administration is desperate to appease Iran and desperate to give Iran everything it wants. Why this is? Because Trump was against Iran. And the Biden administration is above all trying to establish that it knows better than Trump did. And that means abandoning Saudi Arabia as an ally and stabbing it in the back. I wouldn't be in the least surprised if America ended up undercutting Mohammed bin Salman. He faces enough trouble, as I just explained, from his own people and his own base and the clerics in his own country, but he also has to reckon with the possibility that he could lose his most formidable ally.
Last two questions, Dr. Spencer. Is there a possibility of Saudi Arabia opening diplomatic missions with Israel in the near future?
Yes, that could happen. It might have been more likely if Trump had remained president and the Abraham Accords had remained a priority of the State Department, but it still could happen because Iran is such a threat. And so paradoxically, it could happen because of the Biden administration. Whereas the Biden administration continues to empower and enable Iran, then the Saudis may see that they need to have open cooperation with Israel because they face this common foe.
Last question, Dr. Spencer. You have followed Trump a lot more closely than I have. Was there a method to his madness when it came to dealing with issues, international affairs? Was there a method to his madness, or was he just flying, as they say in America, through the seam of his pants? Was there a method to his madness?
You're speaking of Trump?
Trump, yes, sir.
Yes. I think there very much was a method to his madness, that he was an America First president, the first one we've had for quite a long time. That is a president who put the interests of the American people first. It seems to me to be commonsensical. Every world leader should put the interests of his own people first. and operate in that way on the global stage. Modi should be primarily concerned with the people of India, and Merkel with the people of Germany, and so on and so on. It's common sense. But Trump actually was roundly hated and controversial for wanting to put the American people first. He was, however, consistent, and his foreign policy did attempt to adjust our global adventurism, rein it in, and put us on a footing that would be more devoted toward the actual security of the American people. And that's why the Abraham Accords were concluded, that he saw that the Palestinians were genocidally jihadist and intransigent, and instead of trying to appease them, he simply bypassed them and enabled these deals between Israel and Bahrain and the UAE and the others that were in Israel's interests and America's interests and in the interests of the world. And we saw peace in the Middle East, at least in some areas, such that we had never seen before.
I'm reminded of the Camp David Accords in 1978, was it?
79, yeah.
79 between Egypt and Israel. And Sadat and I'm forgetting the Israeli Prime Minister went on to be given the Nobel Peace Prize. So I somehow suspect that if this had been anyone besides Donald Trump, they would have been given the Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords, which has a very strong, emotional connection with all the three Abrahamic faiths of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, because that's the primordial. Is that the correct word to say? The word Abraham is the primordial for all three religions.
Yes, yes, that's right.
So
at least that's the claim.
Yeah. So I think Trump deserved a Nobel Peace Prize for the Abraham Accords, because Arab countries, Egypt had already done that, but still other Arab countries opening up missions with Israel, starting diplomatic relations, and Saudi Arabia, well, they don't have any mission set up there, but they're practically, diplomatically quite close now. So with that, Dr. Spencer, thank you very much for coming on Bharat Vichar. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I asked you some non-theological questions, but somehow you managed to, give some theological answers. So thank you very much. And I hope you will again join Bharat Vichar, sir. Thank you.
I'd be honored. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.